Good morning, philosophers. Hope you're well today. Let's continue with Book 7. Number 10. All substance is soon absorbed into nature. All that animates it soon restored to the Logos. All trace of them both soon covered over by time. Number 11. To a being with Logos, an unnatural action is one that conflicts with the Logos. Oh, that reminds me. I'm going to interview an expert on Stoicism and the Stoics coming up here pretty soon on Disenthrall, so that'll be fun. I'm going to challenge him with a lot of the objections that I've had along the way since we've been reading Plato and Marcus. So stay tuned. Number 12. Straight, not straightened. Number 13. What is rational in different beings is related, like the individual limbs of a single being, and meant to function as a unit. This will be clearer to you if you remind yourself, I am a single limb of a larger body, a rational one. Or you could say a part of only or you could say a part, but then you're not really embracing other people. Helping them isn't yet its own reward. You're still seeing it only as the right thing to do. You don't yet realize who you are really helping. Number 14. Let it happen if it wants to whatever it can happen to, and what's affected can complain about it if it wants. It doesn't hurt me unless I interpret its happening as harmful to me. I can choose not to. Number 15. No matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be good. Like gold or emerald or purple repeating to itself, quote, no matter what anyone says or does, my task is to be emerald, my color undiminished. Number 16. The mind doesn't get in its own way. It doesn't frighten itself into desires. If other things can scare or hurt it, let them. It won't go down that road on the basis of its own perceptions. Let the body avoid discomfort if it can, and if it feels it, say so. But the soul is what feels fear and pain, and what conceives of them in the first place, and it suffers nothing, because it will never conclude that it has. The mind in itself has no needs except for those it creates itself, is undisturbed except for its own disturbances, knows no obstructions except those from within. One second, I'm highlighting something to come back to later. Number 17. Well-being is good luck or good character. 17a. But what are you doing here? Perceptions? Get back to where you came from, and good riddance. I don't need you. Yes, I know it was only force of habit that brought you. No, I'm not angry with you. Just go away. 18. Frightened of change? But what can exist without it? What's closer to nature's heart? Can you take a hot bath and leave the firewood as it was? Eat food without transforming it. Can any vital process take place without something being changed? Can't you see? It's just the same with you and just as vital to nature. 19. Carried through existence as through rushing rapids, all bodies, which are sprung from nature and cooperate with it as our limbs do with each other. Time has swallowed a Chrysippus, a Socrates, and an Epictetus many times over. For Epictetus, read any person and anything. 20. My only fear is doing something contrary to human nature, the wrong thing, the wrong way, or at the wrong time. 21. Close to forgetting it all, close to being forgotten. 22. To feel affection for people even when they make mistakes is uniquely human. You can do it if you simply recognize that they're human too, that they act out of ignorance, against their will, and that you'll both be dead before long. And above all, that they haven't really hurt you. They haven't diminished your ability to choose. Number 23. Nature takes substance and makes a horse, like a sculptor with wax, and then melts it down and uses the material for a tree, then for a person, then for something else, each existing only briefly. It does the container no harm to be put together, and none to be taken apart. Number 24. Anger in the face is unnatural, or in the end is put out for good, so that it can't be rekindled. Try to conclude its unnaturalness from that. If even the consciousness of acting badly has gone, why go on living? 25. Before long, nature, which controls it all, will alter everything you see and use it as material for something else, over and over again, so that the world is continually renewed. 26. When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. If you understand that, you'll feel sympathy rather than outrage or anger. Your sense of good and evil may be the same as theirs, or near it, in which case you have to excuse them. Or your sense of good and evil may differ from theirs, in which case they're misguided and deserve your compassion. Is that so hard? This is basically saying link your emotions of the other person to what you interpret their intentions to have been. You'll feel sympathy rather than outrage or anger. I think it bears marking a distinction between two words, sympathy and empathy. Sympathy signifies an agreement. Like, to have sympathy for somebody that has done something would be almost the same thing as saying, if I were in that same position, I would have done the same thing. I would have made the same decision. I see that as sympathy. Whereas I see empathy as the ability to sort of emotionally project yourself into the other person as they had made the decisions that they did that resulted in whatever results they got. It's different. It's like a disconnected version of sympathy, where I don't have to agree with you to have empathy for, whatever bad situation you've gotten yourself in. But I don't have to have sympathy. There's a difference there. Number 27. Treat what you don't have as non-existent. Look at what you have, the things you value most, and think of how much you'd crave them if you didn't have them. But be careful. Don't feel such satisfaction that you start to overvalue them, that it would upset you to lose them. 28. Self-contraction. The mind's requirements are satisfied by doing what we should and by the calm it brings us. 29. Discard your misperceptions. Stop being jerked like a puppet. Limit yourself to the present. Understand what happens, to you, to others. Analyze what exists. Break it all down, material and cause. Anticipate your final hours. Other people's mistakes? Leave them to their makers. 30. To direct your thoughts to what is said, to focus the mind on what happens and what makes it happen. 31. Wash yourself clean. With simplicity, with humility, with indifference to everything but right and wrong. Care for other human beings. Follow God. 31a. All are relative, it's been said, and in reality only atoms. It's enough to remember the first half, all are relative, which is little enough. 32. On death. If atoms dispersed, if oneness quenched or changed. 33. On pain. Unendurable pain brings its own end with it. Chronic pain is always endurable. The intelligence maintains serenity by cutting itself off from the body. The mind remains undiminished, and the parts that pain affects, let them speak for themselves if they can. 34. On ambition. How their minds work, the things they long for and fear. Events like piles of sand drift upon drift, each one soon hidden by the next. 35. Quote, if his mind is filled with nobility, with a grasp of all time, all existence, do you think our human life will mean much to him at all? How could it? He said. Or death be very frightening? Not in the least. 36. Kingship, to earn a bad reputation by good deeds. 37. Disgraceful, that the mind should control the face, should be able to shape and mold it as it pleases, but not shape and mold itself. 38. And why should we feel anger at the world, as if the world would notice? 39. May you bring joy to us and those on high. 40. To harvest life like standing stalks of grain, grown and cut down in turn. 41. If I and my 2 children cannot move the gods must have their reasons. 42. For what is just and good is on my side. 43. No chorus of lamentation, no hysterics. 44. Quote, then the only proper response for me to make is this. You are much mistaken, my friend, if you think that any man worth his salt cares about the risk of death and doesn't concentrate on this alone, whether what he's doing is right or wrong, and his behavior a good man's or a bad one's. End quote. 45. It's like this, gentlemen of the jury. The spot where a person decides to station himself, or wherever his commanding officer stations him, well, I think that's where he ought to take his stand and face the enemy and not worry about being killed or about anything but doing his duty. End quote. Gross. 46. Quote, but, my good friend, consider the possibility that nobility and virtue are not synonymous with the loss or preservation of one's life. Is it not possible that a real man should forget about living a certain number of years, and should not cling to life, but leave it up to the gods, accepting, as women say, that no one can escape his fate, and turn his attention to how he can best live the life before him? 47. To watch the courses of the stars as if you revolved with them, to keep constantly in mind how the elements alter into one another. Thoughts like this wash off the mud of life below. 48. Plato has it right. If you want to talk about people, you need to look down on the earth from above. Herds, armies, farms, weddings, divorces, births, deaths, noisy courtrooms, desert places, all the foreign peoples, holidays, days of mourning, market days, all mixed together, a harmony of opposites. 49. Look at the past, empire succeeding empire, and from that extrapolate the future, the same thing. No escape from the rhythm of events. That's an important one. Which is why observing life for 40 years is as good as 1,000. Would you really see anything new? 50. Well, maybe a cell phone, dude. No, I'm just kidding. 50. Earth's offspring back to earth, but all that's born of heaven to heaven returns again. Either that or the cluster of atoms pulls apart, and one way or another the insensible elements disperse. 51. Quote, with food and drink and magic spells, seeking some novel way to frustrate death. 51a, quote, to labor cheerfully and so endure the wind that blows from heaven. 51 could be the oh man, my brain is blank this morning. What are the people that are trying to prolong life with technology? That could be their motto. With food and drink and magic spells, seeking some novel way to frustrate death. 52. A better wrestler, not a better citizen, a better person, a better resource in tight places, a better forgiver of faults. 53. Wherever something can be done as the logos shared by gods and men dictates, there all is in order. Where there is profit because our effort is productive, because it advances in step with our nature, there we have nothing to fear. All right. Yeah, so that one is number 49. Look at the past, empire succeeding empire, and from that, extrapolate the future, the same thing, no escape from the rhythm of events. Surprisingly, very close to what I'm thinking about today, which is not exactly a happy thought, I suppose. It's thinking about in my think time today, I was thinking about the horrible things that have happened in the last several hundred years of human history, just in the last several hundred years. And just like Marcus was just talking about, if you've lived 40, well, maybe 40 is a little too short, but if you look at the last couple hundred years, have you seen everything that has happened or will happen or will continue happening? Isn't it hubris? Like it is hubristic to think that we as humans are some sort of like a different species than the sort of human that existed 200 years ago or 1,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. Like it's not like we've changed that much physiologically in our mental capacities. We are likely not very much smarter or wise than the people that lived back then. And so if the people that lived back then can excuse things like the Holocaust or slavery, things like that, I mean, it's good and it's hopeful, and I hope it's true that like once you get rid of this stuff in the world, and once most people understand that it's evil, that it's not going to come back. But I also have to think, like, it hasn't been that long since there was a big war where hundreds of thousands of people were murdered by one side or another for one reason or another. Hiroshima, for example, a lot of innocent men, women, children, babies were melted in that. It seems like it would be dangerously hubristic to think that it would be irresponsibly naive to think that we're past all that's not going to happen again. I mean, there are people in the world that are pissed off at various countries for various reasons, that all it would take would be for one of them to get a certain type of weapon that you know what I'm talking about, and cause the next major catastrophe that 100 years later people are going to think that humanity has moved beyond as well. Like, I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think if we think this stuff can't happen again, because we're just past that now as a species, we're not going to do those big nasty wars anymore. If we just assume that that's the past and won't be in the future, I think we're doomed to repeat it. I think it's going to happen again because we're not going to be watching for it or taking steps to prevent it from happening again. And I'm talking about a we that includes every human on Earth. And when you talk about we's that large, there's literally nothing that you can do as an individual to modify what's going to happen. It's like whatever is coming is coming. And the only question is, do we think it's coming? And I think it would be naive and stupid to not think something is coming someday, eventually. So what do? We need to be prepared. And so that's what I'm thinking about today. Like, I want to make sure that my family is as prepared as possible for something like that. And not like, I don't want to turn my entire life upside down, but I want to take reasonable steps. I want to continue taking reasonable steps. So I'm going to be spending some time today just kind of thinking through the preparations that I have in place, just to make sure that I'm more self-sufficient and more resilient, my family at least. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about. Because history tends to repeat itself. And we are the same species of human that existed before. So that's what I'm thinking about today. On that note, have a great day, everyone.